This program made possible in part by grants from the UCF College of Health and Public Affairs, which promotes excellence in undergraduate and graduate education, research, and community service in health-related professions and public affairs. And the UCF College of Medicine, where our goal is to become America's leading partnership medical school and a national leader in medical education and research. And the UCF College of Nursing, which offers high-quality, innovative academic programs that reflect the healthcare needs of a changing population and meet the needs of today's students.
Hello everyone, welcome to For Your Health. I'm Ed Heiland.
And I'm Charna Wiese. If you've ever toyed with speaker wires, then you have a basic understanding of how our nerves work. You have the wires and then the protective plastic coating. And the protective coating around our nerves is called myelin. And for the most part, it's still a mystery waiting to be solved.
I'm Alicia Callanan Mandigo. This greenhouse could hold the key to our disease-fighting future. I'll have that story.
And they are sometimes among the first to respond to an emergency situation. And they sometimes provide some of the most breathtaking moments in patient care. It's all in a day's work for a medical flight nurse. But first, an update on health news from UCF.
Michael Frumkin, Dean of the School of Social Work and Human Services at Eastern Washington University, is the new Dean of UCF's College of Health and Public Affairs. Under his direction in the last 10 years at Eastern Washington, the social work program more than tripled in size and became a standalone school. He starts at UCF July 1st. UCF researchers have found a new way by measuring how many gold nanoparticles bind to a bacteria cell to speed identifying bacterial infections in patients so proper treatment can start more quickly. Not only is the new technique fast, but it's very sensitive, and it works in complex body fluids like blood.
Most assays, they have a detection limit. So if you have one bacteria or one or two, it's very difficult to detect them. But this one is totally the opposite. The lower number of bacteria you have, the more of a signal you will have. And as I said, you can do it in this turbid solution. Oftentimes, people report these femtomolar and attomolar detection levels, but they only do it in water or PBS, in very clear, pristine solutions. But in here, we're doing it in very dirty solutions.
Researchers say they can use existing equipment to analyze up to 96 samples at a time, speeding the process even more. This is Jerry Klein for Your Health.
A quiet greenhouse shelters what might be the most powerful lettuce and tobacco plants the world has ever seen, because within those plants may lie the key to some of the world's most elusive diseases. Alicia Callanan Mandigo has the story.
Imagine that within this infant plant lies protection against the plague, a vaccine against malaria, or even a cure for diabetes. UCF professor Henry Daniel imagined it 20 years ago.
The primary advantage is that plants are edible. So if you express lettuce or carrot cells, you can powder these cells, put it in a capsule, and orally deliver them. Why would that be advantageous? When insulin is made in yeast or it's made in E. coli, it is purified to 99.99%, which is half of the production cost. Once you purify it, you have to refrigerate it, you have to ship it refrigerated, deliver it in a sterile needle, and all of these costs associated with it. Here, you powder a plant cell, put it in a capsule, store it at room temperature, and then have it as a capsule.
The lab has already worked on using plants to make a vaccine for the plague. It is now working on a cure for diabetes. It would be done by genetically altering plants to produce a protein that would in turn alter the body's immune response.
Because type 1 insulin-dependent diabetes is an autoimmune disorder. By orally delivering this, we demonstrated that the body's immune system can be switched. The body will stop fighting against its own proteins. Once it stops fighting, the few stem cells that are remaining in the pancreas repopulate the pancreas, and the pancreas becomes normal, produces normal levels of insulin. All of this we achieved in diabetic mice after 8 weeks of oral delivery.
The hope that these little plants hold is so profound that when a story about this ran on the local news, it triggered thousands of phone calls, all from diabetics volunteering to be part of clinical trials. But that is still a few years away. For now, plants are monitored in the lab to see which have been successfully genetically altered.
We then carefully look for a specific cell that has integrated this gene, and we kill all the other cells using a selection agent. We have a method where we can kill cells that didn't capture the gene. So we promote the cells that capture the gene, and so all those, when we shoot, if we shoot 1 billion cells, only a handful will capture the gene. And we kill all the others that didn't capture the gene, and then promote the growth of these 5 cells, and each of them will become individual plants.
The process brings more than hope of a cure. Dr. Daniel believes his research will significantly reduce the cost of drugs, which for many in the world are currently out of reach. I'm Alicia Callanan Mandigo for your health.
Current therapies for most autoimmune diseases involve injections or IV infusions, so an oral therapy or even a cure would be a breakthrough for millions.
Among the patients waiting for a breakthrough are those with demyelinating diseases. Myelin is the protective coating that surrounds our nerves. When it's damaged, our nerves have trouble working or stop working altogether.
The mechanisms behind these devastating diseases are still a mystery. Joining us today is Cristina Fernandez, Associate Professor of Molecular Biology and Microbiology. Thank you for joining us. First of all, for most of us, what are these diseases? We first think of multiple sclerosis, but that's just one.
That is the most common one, and it affects young adults. So it's particularly debilitating disease in a certain percentage of the young adults that do not have the relapsing and remitting type. There are other ones that are associated with infectious diseases, or for some reason they occur after childbirth, like Guillain-Barré disorder or disease. That's a sudden demyelination of the axons in the spinal cord most often, and it can happen after a flu shot sometimes. And usually you have complete recovery, but during that period of time where you're losing your ability to walk and to feel, it's a very scary thing to go through. There are other demyelinating disorders of the peripheral nervous system. Those are commonly genetic, and an example is Charcot-Marie tooth. And not only do you lose the myelin, that is the insulating sheath that covers the axon, but when the muscle that usually receives the electrical stimulation from that nerve no longer receives it, the muscle starts to atrophy, and you can have severe muscle loss as well.
So do we know if this is something that is triggered by environmental factors, if this is something that is strictly within some people's system, an autoimmune type of an issue, a combination of both? Do we know those things yet?
Well, I think as far as multiple sclerosis, there is a strange connection with individuals that live in the northern hemisphere. For some reason, living up in Finland, living in the northern part of the United States, you are more predisposed to having multiple sclerosis. And I think there is a link with environment and with your immune system. Certain individuals' immune systems respond in different ways, and they will create an antibody that recognizes some of the proteins that are present in the myelin sheath that coat the axon. And for some unknown reason, you get a flu virus and your immune system makes a mistake and creates an antibody that destroys the myelin. And as you recover, the number of antibodies in your bloodstream go down, and the oligodendrocyte, which is a cell in the central nervous system that creates the myelin, can recover. So the cell itself is not damaged, it's there. It's the lipid sheath that has been destroyed.
The protective covering, and nerves do so many different things and transmit so much different information that the actual first stages, the symptoms can be very hard to detect.
Right. It's some of the first symptoms of multiple sclerosis can affect different parts of the body. So you may have temporary loss of vision. Another person will get tingling sensations in their extremities. Another person will have bladder issues. And it's very hard to pinpoint why you have those symptoms. So
I went through a thing like that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but for the average person, I had trigeminal neuralgia, which is the nerve that goes through here, and I was having all this pain and terrible pain through my face, and the doctors really suspected MS, and I went through all kinds of MRIs, and it turned out to be shingles. But it was a very long time until we figured out what it was.
Right, because shingles doesn't usually affect the trigeminal nerve. It affects the spinal nerve. So normally you have this classic rash that extends along the back of your skin. So,
and I had that too.
Oh, well, they should, you know. I guess, you know, they want to be safe, right?
Right. What had happened with that, it was both sides, and both nerves are affected. But but finding out what is actually causing the nerve, the tingling, the burning, the loss of control, that's the hardest part, is the diagnosis.
Right. And actually, we just had a student in our program who was getting her PhD in immunology with one of the faculty members there, Dr. Khaled. And we watched her deteriorate over the course of 2 years, where she was now in a wheelchair. And sometimes she'd walk around with a cane, and it was just devastating. And she was diagnosed as having multiple sclerosis. And it was taking drugs that are for MS. A little bit experimental, but approved, and she was just not getting better. And she went for a second, third opinion, and they did more MRIs. Or actually, I think a referring physician looked at her MRIs and said, this isn't a typical MS plaque. I think you have an environmentally triggered disorder. Stop working. And of course, if you're a PhD student and you work in the lab, but she did get better. And so I think our environment isn't as clean as it used to be.
Oh, yes.
Right.
It really isn't. And the number of toxic chemicals we use, and, you know, people react strongly.
With all of these variables, I mean, from something that might be a shingles to something that might be MS and turns out not to be MS, as a researcher, where do you begin almost to target, you know, some way of finding out, identifying exactly, you know, which plaque this might be, and also how you start to perhaps begin the foundation for hopefully one day finding some type of a treatment or cure? Right.
So in my laboratory, what I term myself as a basic research scientist. I'm now getting more into what we call translational therapy, where I keep in the back of my mind, I want a therapy, I want a drug target. But I liken my research to trying to fix a car when you don't know how a car works. You can't take it into the mechanic and say, you know, fix the car. The mechanic hasn't studied how the car works and can diagnose. So I try to understand how the cells that create myelin, how do they work? And understand all of the biochemistry and the physiology of that cell. So I provide the basic understanding for others, and more of the time myself, can try to create a therapy. So I study a lot of what controls the signals that control the cell and tell the cell when it's time to carry out specific functions. So in the peripheral nervous system, myelin is made by the Schwann cell. It's a remarkable cell because it acts as its own stem cell. When you have an injury in your nerve, a lot of us have had nerve injuries. You pinch something, you cut yourself, and your hand goes numb for a while. But after about a few weeks, a couple of months, you regain your function. And that's because the peripheral nervous system, unlike the central nervous system, can regenerate. And it regenerates because it's got this magical cell, the Schwann cell, that when the nerve is injured, it dedifferentiates, makes its own stem cell, proliferates, makes millions of copies of itself, and they secrete growth factors or vitamins, good stuff that the injured nerve needs to grow back. And it kind of nurses the nerve back to health and back to its target so it can reinnervate the skin or the muscle. So this Schwann cell has that amazing ability to do that. And that's one of the reasons, and the fact that it's not susceptible to the autoimmune destruction of MS. A lot of people have been trying to use that cell as therapy for MS. I know there was one experimental treatment done at Yale where they've actually implanted the Schwann cells into a patient with MS in the area of the spinal cord or brain, probably the brain that was demyelinated. It's also being used and considered for treatment for spinal cord injury because the Schwann cells do enter spinal cord injured animals and enter the spinal cord and remyelinate. And there's been a lot of success in getting some kind of function back for spinal cord injured animals. And there's a large push in trying to use the same cell to repair some of the injury in the spinal cord.
We're going to talk more about Schwann cells in just a moment. We have to take a short break, though, and we're going to talk more with Cristina, Schwann cells and nerves and many other things as well. And we're also going to give you an update on our new medical school, and that's all coming up right after this break. We're back once again with Dr. Cristina Fernandez. Thank you so much for joining us once again. We left the discussion talking about Schwann cells, and we really need a further understanding, at least I certainly do, of exactly what a Schwann cell is, and also how it can lead us perhaps into some other areas that I know you're looking at, NF1 and some of those. So I'll let you pick it up from there and go take a run with it.
Okay, so the mature function of the Schwann cell is to make myelin in your peripheral nerves to allow the electrical signals that the nervous system uses to communicate with different parts of the body to be transmitted. There is a disorder in which the Schwann cells, instead of making myelin, I spoke before as they can create their own little stem cells and they can renew themselves. In the disorder called neurofibromatosis type 2, there's a mutation in the gene that encodes this protein known as myelin. And when that happens, the Schwann cell, instead of making myelin, some of those cells escape and begin to make copies of themselves, and they actually make tumors. And the classical presentation of someone with neurofibromatosis type 2 is loss of hearing or balance. And when a young child, about the time of 10, 15 years of age, they can start losing some of their hearing. You go in for a hearing test, and an astute doctor will immediately take them for an MRI just to check, because the classical presentation are two tumors behind each ear in the nerve that allows you to hear and to maintain your balance. So I've been working on this disorder, trying to identify, again, what are the signaling cascades or the communication pathways that the cell uses to control its own growth. So the idea there is to, once you identify the avenue that the Schwann cell uses to control its own growth, you then have identified specific targets where the chemist can come in and create drugs that will tweak the activity of that protein to increase its activity or decrease its activity and allow you to tell the Schwann cell it's not time to grow, slow down your growth, or hopefully just commit cell suicide, a process called apoptosis. So we study these cells in the laboratory, in tissue, in culture, and we just try to control them. So we can use that cell to do what we want it to do, when we want it to do it, for as long as we want to do it.
Now, neurofibromatosis is much more common than most people think.
It's amazingly so, unfortunately. Neurofibromatosis is now considered a group of 3 disorders, NF1, type 1, 2, and schwannomatosis. And together, the first type, NF1, is more common than muscular dystrophy and cystic fibrosis put together. And it manifests with a lot of subcutaneous tumors that can cover your entire skin. So you're just covered with bumps all along the skin. And that is cosmetically very disturbing. But the more serious consequence of NF1 is these these plexiform neurofibromas that have the endings of the axons mixed in with the Schwann cells, and they can form tumors anywhere along the nervous system, but they're deep in the tissue or the muscle, and it's a certain percentage of them will become metastatic and lead to our sarcoma and can really, cause the end of your life.
So where do we stand at finding the switch, whether it's the on or the off, or just some kind of a regulator to give us some control over it?
Well, this field is being approached by different strategies, like all cancers. There's not one magic bullet. The idea now is you need combinatorial therapies. So there are a number of people that spend their time looking at control of myelination. They're going to give us some answers. The investigators that spend their time looking at proliferation and come to it from the cancer point of view. They're providing a lot of information. So we actually now have our first biotech company that is focused solely on coming up with drug therapies for neurofibromatosis type 1, 2, and schwannomatosis. It's based in San Francisco. And it's got a scientific review board and head that's internationally. It's an international group. Someone from Paris is the chief scientific advisory person. And it's pulling in a lot of expertise from scientists all around across the world trying to come up with therapies. And there are a number of drugs that they are working on. So hopefully in the not too near future, there will be more clinical trials. There are already clinical trials going on for this set of disorders.
It takes a village.
It takes a village.
So many things. Thank you so much, Dr. Cristina Fernandez Valle, for joining us and telling us about this. And we're going to have you back to get into it and keep an update of your work going for us here.
Okay, thanks.
Well, there are certainly lots of changes and new plans for the UCF College of Medicine coming to our Lake Nona campus in 2009. Here's a look.
University of Central Florida's College of Medicine received preliminary accreditation in February. The accrediting agency said that the plan for the college is worthy of emulation in several areas. For example, it does a good job of using university resources such as information technology.
They said that our College of Medicine had the potential to be a national model, once again, for other medical schools in our knowledge management and assessment systems. And these are currently in development. And I just want you to know how pleased I am that we were able to achieve this in our very first site visit.
President John Hitt added to the list of university resources that will help make the college a model for 21st century medical education.
Bringing in the tremendous capabilities we have in simulation and training into the curriculum and the tremendous advantages in imaging that our Center for Optics and Photonics, Center of Excellence in Optics and Photonics and College of Optics and Photonics make possible here at the university. So we've got some huge advantages in Orlando and specifically at UCF.
The college expects to begin reviewing student applications in summer 2008 and open its doors in fall 2009.
Only a few hospitals in any given city have medical flight helicopters, which means the nurses working on those crews have special expertise. They also have amazing experiences.
Air Care 1 Scramble, active, scene call, Seminole County.
This might be the most visible medical team any hospital has. From the moment they're called, it's high drama and a whole lot of cool.
A lot of our folks, all they need is a big S and a cape on their back and they'd be happy. But majority of us would do this for free, don't tell our boss.
This is Joe Bob Pierce, a UCF College of Nursing graduate who is now the Trauma Program Manager and EMS Manager at Orlando Regional Medical Center.
Well, we're a piece of the trauma system here in the state of Florida and a piece of the EMS system. And our colleagues in the EMS community recognize patients that need rapid transport to a trauma center, which Orlando Regional Medical Center is for Central Florida for both kids and adults. And so our EMS colleagues recognize the patients that can benefit from that care. They call the Air Care team.
Air Care record line, Bridget.
A call can come in from anywhere at any time. Sometimes it's just transporting a patient from one hospital to another. Other days, it's responding to a catastrophic event, so the flight team has to be at the top of its game. The helipad is definitely an area of high drama. They can land as many as 3 of these big guys here, and they can land a 4th helicopter over at Arnold Palmer.
The scope of our practice is greater than would be typically in the emergency department or the ICU. Is you typically don't see nurses putting in endotracheal tubes, putting in lines, IV lines, upside down in a car, in a ditch, in the rain type scenarios. We work with our partner, which is a paramedic, who are used to that, and so it's a nice mix between the nursing and EMS to have that team.
Joe Bob actually started his career as a paramedic, but 2 years into it switched to nursing. He then continued to advance his career and education.
Nursing gives you the ultimate ability to change your job every couple of months, if you wanted to years. My colleagues that are on the program have worked emergency departments, they've worked ICUs, pediatric ICUs, they've done education, they've done multiple things. The ultimate thing is typically flight nursing, is that you've done all these things in order to prepare to be a flight nurse. And that's what we want. We want somebody who's flexible, who's got a lot of experience, who's got a lot of skills that they picked up over the years as a nurse. Oh, I love my job. My wife's a pediatrician, and I'm a flight nurse, but I've been doing this over 30 years, and I can't think of anything else I'd rather do.
I'm Alicia Callanan Mandigo for your health.
A flight nurse's career can range from disaster response to private care and includes working for commercial airlines who sometimes fly patients with specific medical needs. And that's going to do it for us for today. I'm Charna Wiese.
And I'm Ed Heiland. Thanks for joining us. See you next time on For Your Health.